Hello, everyone, and welcome to the presentation and personal brand session at our 2022 LDI, which will be hosted by Foxtel. My name is Cara McGoldrick, and I work as a student advisor here at CareerTrackers in the New South Wales and ACT team. So before we get started, I would like to make an acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge that we are all learning and working on Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander land. And as we all dial in from different countries and nations today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, and community. I would also like to extend my respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues and students who are present with us today. So before we kickstart this really exciting session, I'd just like to remind all the students to utilise the amazing Career Trackers app and to ask any questions that come to mind for our great presenters to answer at the end of the session. And now to introduce our speakers for this afternoon, we have Jake Duke and Chelsea Hamilton. Jake Duke is a Fox Sports commentator and presenter who has been a regular member of NRL Tonight on Fox League, alongside Megan Barnard and Matt Russell. In 2021, Jake provided analysis and reporting from the sideline of NRL matches and is a proud Indigenous Kamilaroi man. He has expressed the importance of the NRL's Indigenous round and has contributed to Foxtel's Reconciliation Action Plan. Thank you for joining us today, Jake. We also have Chelsea Hamilton with us today, a proud Darug woman and a Career Trackers alumni. After graduating in 2017, Chelsea has worked at Channel 7 in media services and now works at Fox Sports in broadcast operations. In her spare time, Chelsea volunteers for St. John Ambulance as a medic and enjoys spending her time with family on country. So a very, very warm welcome to you both, and I will hand it over to you, Chelsea, to get us started with some questions for Jake.
Thank you, Cara, for that beautiful welcome to country and that introduction. I'm not one to be on screen. I usually like to be behind camera. So I'm going to hand it straight over to Jake and start off the day by just asking if we could hear a little bit more about you and your background and where you're from.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Chelsea, because I'm not used to answering the questions. I'm more used to asking them in my job. I'm a sports reporter, sports journalist for Fox Sports, but I've been only at Fox Sports for about a year now. For about 8 years before that, I worked at Channel 9 as a sports reporter for the 9 News. As Cara mentioned there in the introduction, I'm a proud Kamilaroi man. I'm from originally from New South Wales, Moree, small little country town about northwestern New South Wales, and then grew up on the Gold Coast on Bunjalung land there, and then about 9 or 10 years ago now moved to Sydney to pursue my career as a sports journalist. I got a cadetship to work at over a year to work at SBS, Fox Sports, and then Channel 9, an Indigenous cadetship that was kind of like a foot in the door. And then 9 was the last place I worked, and they were really happy with the work I did and basically offered me a job from there. And I worked there for 8 or 9 years and then moved to Fox Sports last year to take up a role. And what I've always wanted to do was be a sports broadcaster, work on sports broadcast work on Fox Sports coverage, and that's what I do now. So really kind of living my dream, which is pretty cool.
Great. Do you think you have a career highlight that you could share with us so far?
Look, I don't have one career highlight. I think, as I said, what I get to do for a job is pretty much a career highlight for me. I've traveled all over the country, going to big fights, going to big events, and someone pays me to do it. Like that's what I would do in my spare time. I would pay to go and watch the Australian Open. I'd pay to go to State of Origin grand finals, but someone pays me to do that for a job, and I sit there and talk about it. Like it's almost like it's my hobby that I get to do for a job. So I think to narrow it down to one highlight would be hard, but I think also the biggest highlight for me in my career so far is the fact that I've been able to use my job to, I guess, enhance the things I'm passionate about. As you said, I'm a proud Kamilaroi man. and working in mainstream media is not an opportunity that a lot of Indigenous people get. And over my time at Channel 9 and Fox Sports, I've tried to use that reach and the massive kind of influence that these mainstream media companies have to improve the plight of Indigenous people, whether that's raising awareness of Invasion Day things or some of the issues that are still prevalent in Australian society around Indigenous people in Indigenous Australia. And I've tried to do stories on that when I can, tried to do interviews on that when I can. As Cara mentioned, I worked with Foxtel on the reconciliation plan. I've done a lot of stuff with News Corp in terms of last year we created a thing called Indigenous Sports Month, which was all about speaking to Indigenous athletes about not just them and their sporting achievements, but what they're passionate about, what the issues they think need to be brought to the surface. Because I think sport's such a powerful medium. It allows people to, I guess, people identify with sports stars. And I always say the most prominent Indigenous people in Australia are probably sports stars. When you think Kathy Freeman, Adam Goods, Buddy Franklin, so people listen to what these people have to say. And so my job as a journalist, I've always felt, is to help try and share those stories and put them in the mainstream media as much as possible in those issues. So I think that would be probably what I'm most proud of, is kind of the work we've done in the Indigenous space, that stuff that runs on Foxtel, stuff around the Indigenous All-Stars game, stories we've done there, stuff we've done for News Corp. And my podcast I do is called the Refuse to Lose podcast, and it's all about athletes that want to make a difference in the world. And we've had that on Foxtel and KO Sports as well since I joined Fox. And, you know, people get to see and people get to hear these guys' stories, get to listen to what it's like in their communities, what it was like for them growing up. And it kind of opens people's eyes, because these people have a lot of power, as I said, and a lot of influence. So I think that would be a career highlight for me, is the kind of work I've got to do alongside my job.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really great that you've earned yourself a position on this platform, and then you're using your platform to really promote country and people. I think it's really inspirational.
Thank you.
So on that note, what do you think you would put your success down to?
Look, it sounds cliche, Chelsea, but I think it's hard work. It's working harder than everyone else does, in terms of like being over prepared. Like, I come into any game that I do for Fox, and I'll have thousands of words and notes on one game that I've spent hours and hours doing, and I'll use 5% of it. But it's having it there that you know that you've got it, and that you've backgrounded yourself on so much information. You've got information to rely on. It's just there's no real secret to it. It's preparation. I remember when I was young, like my mum used to force me to do like 5 hours of homework on a Saturday, 5 hours of homework and study assignments on a Sunday, and I wasn't allowed to leave or do anything till I did that. And I remember thinking it's so stupid when I was young, and then you see the results of it. You see that you start to get really good grades, and I ended up finishing school with straight A's just out of pure work. Like, I'm not the smartest person, I'm not the most gifted academic student, but just hard work, putting in more effort, and then that hard work leads to something else. It got me the cadetship that put me on this trajectory to now be where I am today. Like, you can say you got lucky, or, people will say, oh, you've got an opportunity because you're Indigenous, but I got an opportunity because I worked hard and worked harder than most people. And then that opportunity opened itself up to me. And then that's kind of set me on this trajectory to where I am now. And it can be easy to think, that you've done enough, but I always like to be overly over-prepared. And then also, I think the biggest thing as well for me was sacrifice. Like, I've worked every weekend of my 20s doing sport. I want to work in sport. That's what I've done. Like, when my mates are out drinking and having a good time and enjoying their 20s, I've had to work Saturdays and Sundays, literally every weekend. I've had to do the early morning shifts. 3 years straight, I got up at 1 a.m. on work days to go and work on the Today Show in the mornings and get the sport ready for Today's Show. And there were times that I didn't want to do it. There was times I sat on the side of my bed and thought, oh, is this all worth it? But I think what was underlying in all that was the passion that I had for the job and what I do. So yes, it was tough, but it made it easy. And I knew that what I wanted, I knew what I was going for. I knew the light at the end of the tunnel. I knew that I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. I had seen people kind of follow this trajectory, and I thought, well, I can do that too. I can work on that same. I have to put in the hard yards and I'll get there as well. So I think it's easy to say work hard, and it's easy to say, you're going to have to do all the, crappy jobs that no one wants to do. But you also have to know why you're doing it. You have to be passionate about it. You have to know what your end game is. Otherwise, all the hard work and all that won't really matter, because at the end of the day, you just want to do it. You won't do the hard work if you don't care what you're doing. So, yeah, I would say find your passion and then just work ridiculously hard at it. Say yes. Don't complain about things. Don't whinge. That's honestly, it's cliche because everyone says it, but it's really the secret. I've just put in a lot of time and effort into what I've done, and eventually people realize. And just don't get too caught up on, if it's all coming together now or what the plan is. Just kind of keep your head down and don't compare yourself to others, and it'll work itself out. That's what I've found.
Yeah, definitely. I think the hard work certainly does pay off, particularly in this industry. People notice things, and eventually one day you get there if that's where you want to be. 100%. So do you think, as your job as a presenter, I think part of that hard work would then have to come with a tiny bit of confidence, maybe? So how would you say that you have worked up that confidence or that self-belief that you're able to go out and do your job every day and present on the TV in front of hundreds of thousands of people?
Yeah, people have this, misconception, and even I have it. I see people in my own industry, and they seem so confident. I look at presenters that are more experienced than me. I'm like, how do they do that? They make it look so easy, and I think that can kind of rattle you, because you think, oh, I'm not that confident, or I'm not that good. But everyone, I know people that they spend their entire lives on television and they hate it. They still get that nerves every time they do it. They public speak for a living. They're so good at it, but it's never really that comfortable in them. They fake it, basically. They know how to do it. And I think the only way, and I'm the same, I first started doing television, I hated live crosses. I hated, having to talk on camera, the anxiety, the sweating, the tightness in your chest. It all just happens. We all know the feeling, right? And then I had that. I used to avoid them like the plague, so, but I think the only thing that has ever made me any better at them and is repetition, just doing it more and more and more and more. There's just no other secret. People can tell you all the things you want, settle down, focus, 3 deep breaths, all those things. But I think the only thing you can do is just putting yourself in that scenario more and more and more, practicing it, stuffing up. You're going to stuff up. It's as simple as that. And the more you do it, the more comfortable it will become. It will become second nature. It's like muscle memory. It's like anything. It's like lifting weights at the gym. It's like running 5 kilometers. Your body just gets used to it. And naturally, then when you're about to stand up and do something, the anxiety is just lower. It just happens naturally. It's happened over years and years of practices. And basically now, where anytime I go to work now, I'm on TV live. That would have been my worst nightmare at one point. But I think now it's just, I've done it so much that you just get more and more used to it. And I think, so repetition is the key to being confident. And then don't compare yourself to others, as I said before. All of these people that look like they're killing it on television and they're so good, they've had the exact same insecurities as you. They've stuffed up. They've just practiced it. They practiced it and practiced it. And it's just, the more you do that, the more you don't compare yourself to others. Just do what you do. Put yourself in those uncomfortable scenarios. It'll get better and better, and you'll be more confident with it. I think that's the best advice you can get, because it's a natural reaction to be anxious. There's not much you can do in the moment to change it, except just don't be scared of it. Attack it every time.
I guess it's a good reminder to just keep pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones, no matter how bad we don't want to do it.
100%. Yeah, exactly right.
So do you think on that note, there have been any moments in your career that maybe built up your confidence or potentially bruised it? And if so, how did you come back from that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had, as I said, lots of things when they go well, they build your confidence. The more you do it, the better you get. But yes, as I said, you will stuff up. It's just as simple as that. There will be, I've gone blank before. I've forgotten what I was going to say. I've had, audio issues, and you're just standing there. I think we've got a video in a second of one of a stuff up for me. But yeah, it's just, you're going to have those problems. I think the more you just embrace them. We have this saying in television that, it's on Mars now. So like once you had something stuff up, we used to joke that the TV signal's gone to Mars. So it doesn't really matter. People saw it, but now it doesn't exist anywhere. It's gone. It's one thing, a couple of people saw it and then they'll forget about it tomorrow. It's important not to kind of harp on it. So I think that was always one good thing, is that, it's on Mars now. And I think the other thing as well is that it's never as bad as you look at it, that it is in your own head. Like I've always found that when you stumble over something or you stuff up, you think, oh God, that was awful. And then you watch it back and you're like, look, if I take myself out of that and just think this is someone else I'm watching, you'd be like, that's a bit of a stuff up, but no one cares as much as you do, like no one invests as much as you do. Just separate yourself from it and learn to think, well, it's gone now. It's flushed. That would be the best advice I could give, because as I said, you're going to stuff up. And the good thing is most of your stuff ups, if you're a presenter like me, or you're coming through and you're learning how to public speak or things, they're going to be done in instances where it doesn't really matter. Like in your mind, it matters. Everything matters at the time. But really, they won't be done in front of, when you're doing a high-paying job or you've got to this massive point where all these things will be done in like smaller contexts where you'll make a mistake and people forget about it and it has no real bearing or repercussions. I've stuffed up, heaps of live crosses. That happened at 11:30 on a Wednesday on the 9 News. It went for a minute and no one would ever have known or seen, or, they were watching it with the volume off in a hospital waiting room, all these things generally aren't going to determine your life or your career. So just let them flush. I think the example we have in the video we're going to show, if I give you context of what's happening in it before you watch it, basically this is an example of how live TV can go completely wrong. And this really wasn't my fault, this instance. I've had things that were heaps of my fault, but if you see this, when you're on television, you have a earpiece in, obviously, and you can hear the program. And in the ad break before they come to you, there's someone checking. They said, Jake, can you hear us? Blah, blah, blah. And they kept talking to me and I wasn't answering. And unbeknownst to all of us, the little basically portable cell thing that sends the picture back and the audio back was set on a 20-second delay. So I was hearing things 20 seconds after they were actually happening. So they're trying to talk to me for 20 seconds. I'm not responding. Then I eventually hear it 20 seconds later and go, got you loud and clear. They get that back and think, he can hear us, not realizing that I answered a question 20 seconds after they asked it. So anyway, then the broadcast comes to air and the presenter throws to me and you'll see what happens. I'm just totally out of it, 20 seconds behind. And this is an example of how it can all just go wrong and you can get your confidence down about it. Or you'll notice what I do is I just kind of stand there and I talk when I think I'm supposed to be talking. And then as soon as I hear someone else talking over the top of me, once it comes through my ear 20 seconds later, I'll just stop and just stand there and rely on someone else to kind of pick up on it, because I can only do what I can do. They can see everything I can't. So it's probably a good time to just have a look at this video and show you what a kind of stuff up can be and how you kind of, I guess, try and stay calm.
Volume. It's the Melbourne Star's Jake Duke. He's at the SCG. Jake, how is the weather looking? Alrighty, Jake Duke clearly does not know how the weather's looking at the moment. It's playing a little bit of havoc, so we'll move on. Brian Lara and William Akram have played plenty of games against Australia. Today they were dotting the green and gold, and
but what we do know is that the Sixers will be crowned champions here tonight if it is cancelled, because they won the first final.
All right, the duo.
So you see that it's yeah, you can see the delays happening, all the stuff happening that's kind of that can go wrong, and you can let that kind of get you down afterwards because you know, it's like, oh, that looks so terrible. That was, you know, wasn't my fault. What could I have done better? But yeah, as I said, that one wasn't my fault per se, and I think Rob, who I was presenting with, handled it really well. But it's just about letting that go. Like, it was on Mars. You know, a couple of people saw it. You get one or two messages, and then it's done. Like, just move on, focus on the next one. And as I said before, keep putting yourself in those scenarios where, you know, you got to get back on the horse. You got to keep doing what you're doing, learning, practicing, and then eventually you'll get good enough that, you know, like in that example there, you can see that I'm actually calm. Like, I talk when I think I'm talking, and then as soon as I hear another voice, I just stop. I'm not looking at my cameraman freaking out about what's going on, like all that, because that, if that goes to air, that looks silly. So you just kind of talk and then stop and stay calm, and that all comes from the fact that I've done it 1,000 times. And sometimes you get things where you're talking and something will just be in your ear, or a loud thing will go up, or something will stuff up, and you just got to just talk and pretend like you just get confident, and you know that, look, sometimes I can't hear you. Sometimes things drop out. You just press on, assuming you're on air and assuming that people are watching, and you get used to those things and those stuff ups the more you do it. So when it's not your fault and when it is your fault, you just get more used to it.
That's it. We're our own worst critics, aren't we? Especially with these kind of things.
100%.
So on from that, I touched on the fact that I don't like being on camera a little earlier, but public speaking, that's definitely a big part of your job, especially as a presenter. It's definitely one of the most feared activities because it leaves us feeling really vulnerable to other people's reactions. So as a presenter, you present to thousands of people on the TV every day. Do you have any tips that keep that fear at bay, or that might help us hone our own presenting skills?
Yeah, I do. I actually had to be. I had to sit down and think about these over the years, the amount of tips that kind of people have given me and stuff. But the first one, as I've said, is research and repetition. So just know your stuff, know it better than anyone, and put yourself in that scenario as much as you can, and it just gets easier. The other thing I've learned over the years is if you're trying to talk about, you know, a long thing or trying to get a number of points across, don't ever try and memorize something word for word. I think a lot of people do that because it's safe, and they think, oh, it's there in front of me and I know everything word for word, and I can look down, and it's like a safety mechanism. But trying to remember something for word, I think throws you more than anything. I think you should know the points that you're going to hit, always have them as notes. Like, no matter how good you get, I think notes are invaluable, because even the best presenters lose their way, things distract them, everything can get thrown out. I think you should always have your notes in your hand, but dot point the main points you want to hit. And then just on that theme of repetition again, like, obviously if you know you're going to talk about something, and sometimes you don't have much time to prepare and stuff like that, and it's just off the cuff, and again, through repetition and stuff, you'll get used to that and you can react a lot better. But I think if you're practicing something and you're public speaking, have your dot points, and then when you're practicing it, it should sound, if you say it 10 times, it should sound different 10 times. You know, you hit the same markers, you say the same things, but you're not trying to focus on word for word or one little thing, because that will throw you. Just be like, have your points, and then talk and get to those points, and you can look down, and like, yeah, and just keep going and like ad-libbing as you speak, and things pop in your head, you look at things, you interact with the room, because you've obviously, that's the other two things, is that eye contact as well. So that helps, right? If you're not memorizing things or looking down because you're distracted by, you're looking at the paper as a safety net. If you've got your ideas in your head and your few points and you're just talking to them, it helps eye contact, it helps engagement. Obviously they're the simple ones: eye contact, and your body language. Obviously, stand up, stand tall, sit straight, whatever you're doing. Obviously, your presentation, how you look, all those things are obviously easy. But I think the other thing as well is projection. There's reading, and there's reading off a script, and then there's how you emphasize words, how you project your voice, how you kind of speak from your diaphragm out, emphasize certain points that you're trying to make. There's monotone reading a page, and then there's those things. And as I said, having your notes, talking off notes, and being more anecdotal and ad lib will allow you to emphasize, allow you to become more confident, I think, than relying on that safety net of just reading words. There's nothing worse than someone who's just written words and they just get up and say, oh yeah, blah, 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 like that, as opposed to someone who's like, yeah, and so then I was there, and then this happened at twice in the life, and speaking with your hands, speaking out, looking out, all those things I think are they're really important. Obviously, the power of good storytelling, knowing kind of how long you have and what you're trying to get to. What's your point? What's your point, and how do you build to that kind of peak in your story, and your end point? Whether you're telling an anecdote that has a joke at the end, or whether you're presenting an argument, whether you're throwing to a story or trying to give context to a story, you got to understand your time frame and also how best to get that information across. There's people that, as we've all sat through something, and someone who's just waffled through something. Right? I think an example of watching the Australian Open the other night, and there's a lady doing the presenting after the final, and she's there talking and waffling on about, and went for 5-6 minutes. And the first thing everyone thought is, first of all, no one's here to see you. They're here to see Rafael Nadal. They're here to see Ash Barty. And also, you've kind of just waffled on here about a lot of stuff, and you've lost people. And I think that's the other thing is, your audience, right? Know what they want from you. Know, that you're there to deliver this information, and this is how you're going to deliver it, right? Because otherwise you're just someone who's just lost the room straight away. You have to know your audience, know what they're after from you, and then find the most succinct and, I think, powerful way to deliver that. So, yeah, and also I think a good thing to do is make notes as well. Like, people seem to think, if you're hosting something, or if you're, you're public speaking at something, it always pays to show that you've listened to someone else. Someone else speaks before you. Make notes of little things that they say. That's like talking about your audience and knowing your audience. Listen to what other people have said before you. Listen to what other people have said on the panel. Make notes, write it down as they're talking, and that way you can refer to them later. And that engages people more, that you've listened, and that you are learning and listening to that audience, or listening to those other people in the room. That I think that's really important. Don't be afraid of feedback. People can get their feelings hurt if someone says, you could have been better in this area. You were rushing. I've had that in my life a lot. People say, you're rushing, slow down a little bit. My boss at Fox rings me pretty much all the time, in terms of, like, he could even ring me when I'm on air. Like, I've just done a cross or something, and then he'll ring and be like, need you to come up with your energy 10%. It doesn't feel natural to you. When you're doing it, you'll feel like you're being a bit over the top, but when it comes across on television, it's better. Trust me. And I'm grateful for those kind of things, that people are, that someone's ringing you, taking the time, taking the effort, and it might seem like it's a criticism, but if it's done in the right way, it's constructive, listen to it and have that in your mind. And then I think the other things, obviously, never underestimate the power of a smile. A smile goes a long, long way, and it's hard. People forget to smile. Like you'd be amazed how often I've watched myself back and gone, smile. You look like you're focusing. You look like you're not, and you might still be focusing, but if you're smiling, it makes it look like you're kind of the confidence. What we were talking about before, it's almost like faking it. Like, yes, your mind can be running 1,000 miles an hour behind, and you could be panicking, you could be feeling anxious about it. But if you just turn a smile up, the difference it makes is, you can hear it. They say in television, you can hear a smile. So if someone's smiling, it kind of projects more confidence through. I think you can't underestimate the value of a smile when you're presenting. And something someone said to me once actually was, the person with the microphone has the power. So you can feel like you're talking and you can feel like, what are those people thinking? Or am I being rushed? Or what's the timing like? Or all these things, or, should I say that? You've got the power. You have the microphone. Like, don't feel rushed by anyone else. Don't feel like you need to hit this certain point or hit this certain marker, or you get panicked into rushing things that you want to say because of what you think is happening behind the scenes, or you think. You've got the microphone. You have the power. So if that means you've run out of things to say, you've run out of things to say. Throw back. Don't feel like, that was too short, or I need to fill time for someone else, or, television's all about timing, or presentation's all about timing, and people want you to hit certain. But if you run out of things to say, you're the one with the microphone. Just throw back instead of just waffling on and talking about nothing. Like, I've had that happen before, where I've had crosses where things happen so last minute, and I just had to react and give a reaction to something. I think it was the Bathurst 1000, and it happened. The winner crossed the line about 20 seconds before I had to go on air and say who won, right? And I knew very little about anything really. And I tried to just talk and talk, because after I'd run out of things to say after about 25 seconds, I tried to just keep going, keep padding, because I knew they needed a minute. I knew they needed this, but you've got the microphone, you've got the power. So if you've got something to say it. If you don't, throw back, or hand over to someone else, or move on to the next thing, because it's your show really when you're up there. So don't, people are behind the scenes will kind of make up for things, especially in the presenting world, or you can always make up more time somewhere else, or it's better than just feeling like you need to do something that someone else has got this perception in their head. So just, you have the microphone, you have all the power. And as I said before, I think notes, you're never too good for notes. You're never too experienced for notes. Always just have things written down, no matter how confident you are. As I said before, anxiety, television cameras, lights, people, all has the ability to totally throw things off for you. Another little thing I always do is I actually always have a pen in my hand. I don't know if you see it there. I've always found that to be just something, because when you're talking and you're kind of presenting, you kind of become aware of all the little things you do that your brain ticks over with, that when you're thinking and when you're speaking, your brain might be, I find sometimes when I'm overthinking, I'll blink a lot, or my arm will just kind of move, like my elbow, you see it there, will just kind of move by my side. All these little things that your body kind of exhibits when it's thinking or it's in anxiety. But I've always found holding a little pen, and if you're talking, your finger might be moving the pen around, or just kind of playing with it. It takes away all that, and it's like an outlet for that nervous energy. And it's not something that's distracting. I always used to notice when I watch myself back, I can notice my arm moving. I can notice I'm blinking too much. But when you're holding a pen or something, you just kind of might play with it. You might think, and it just takes away that nervous energy, but you don't actually notice you're doing it, and people on camera don't notice you're doing it. I think that was a good little bit of advice I got once that stuck with me, because it just, the body has this funny way of doing all these weird little things when you're thinking and you're on display and all these people are looking at you. So I think that's a good one. Yeah, so that's most of them. I know there was a lot in there, but yeah, I just think these are all things you'll pick up and learn if you're presenting. They're just skills that you just have to, as I said, practice. And when I think back to some of the early stuff I did, or some of the, like if I watched it now, it'd honestly be so cringeworthy and like awful. And I think, why did anyone give me a chance? And it's like, because people realize, everyone has to learn, everyone has to kind of go through those stages. And as I said, most of that learning will be done when no one's watching or very few people are watching. So, and it'll prepare you for when you need to be really good.
Yeah, I really like that. I've picked up a pen while you've been talking and it's helping. So that's good. So we've talked a bit about how you prepare for interviews or how you prepare for a cross or presentations that you're about to do. But do you think that your preparation has changed at all since we've experienced COVID? And that obviously has changed some of the ways that you conduct things. For example, like today, usually we would be sitting in the same room doing this, but we're doing it over like an online conference. So do you prep in a different way for these kinds of things?
Yeah, I think there are certain elements to it. And this is, like, as I said, we like I do a podcast, as I said, it's called the Refuse to Lose podcast, and we do it by video as well. So like normally we would film it in the studio at Fox Sports. But then a lot of it had been done over online over the last year or two. And I've had to do podcasts like this, basically just two people sitting there looking at each other. And you notice the format now is that you and I can't back and forth a lot because of the internet, because of the audio, because of it would all just blur together. And so it changes the course of the interview. Then it becomes a lot more just question, answer in this particular instance, right? As opposed to sitting in a room with someone, and it can be a lot more chatty, ad lib, laughing about things that there's no, you don't have to go back and forth because you don't have to rely on the internet connection, all this stuff. So that does change little things about the way you interview, definitely when you're doing it online, and the way that things have changed in COVID definitely has made a difference. But there are also the similarities, the things that are always the same. And that is like, obviously, how you present yourself, how you light yourself. People just look at what you do. Before we started this, I sat there, for 10 minutes, just trying to figure out the best part of the house, where the light is, where it shines on the front of you. The camera angles, the grooming, your body language, all those things are totally the same, right? People can see it. Like, I'm sitting in my own house here. I don't need to be wearing a button-up shirt, but it's what you do because you do your hair. You just make sure you're presentable no matter what, because it's the same as being on television. If you're still at home, you still try and still do the same things, and obviously look, eye contact. Like, I can't see anyone. I can't see the people that are sitting here listening to me, but I look at the camera. It just feels weird to just stare into a little camera, but that's what you've got to do. All these things are kind of the same principle. You talk with emphasis in your voice. You talk with hand movements, motion. All those things are all similar. I think it just changes a little bit in terms of how you would do a question and answer an interview and how we've had to do them just with over the internet and stuff. But the same basic principles still apply. When you're speaking, know your stuff. Like I'm sitting here, I've got notes in front of me. It's all about preparation, body language, eye contact, how you look. It's presenting, no matter what kind of format you're in. If you're over the internet, if you're in person, if you're recording to a camera, it's all the same kind of stuff, right? So but there has been little changes, but still the same in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and so I guess from that have you got any other tips that might help the interns put their best foot forward when they're doing a lot of this online work? Obviously, you've gone over presentation, how they dress, where in the house they might position themselves. Is there anything else at all, or is that just about?
No, I think that's the best advice I could give is those things. And I know I keep saying it, but like, just you cannot be more prepared. And it's just in that instance that if things do fall apart, or if something does go wrong, if you know something, if you've learned it, because it helps. This is actually one thing I do find, and a lot of people on television do as well, is they handwrite stuff. You know, there's typing things, but then there's like, if I was to, you'll see like television presenters when they're on camera, they've written down their throws, or like, you know, they've got something to say over they've got a little monologue to give. They've written it down, handwritten it down, not typed it, because handwriting has such a way of making things stick in your mind more. Like that would be one thing I think we haven't touched on, is that kind of, you're prepared and you over prepare and you know your stuff, but when you can, if you're trying to remember something, if you're trying to get something out, write it down with your hand and reread it. It'll stick in your mind better than just typing it out, or just thinking you can remember it. I think that's a good little tip that someone gave me once. But yeah, as I said, all those things are all the same. If you know your stuff, you'll find that your presenting's better because you're confident. You know, I don't have to sit here and look down all the time or read something, because I've kind of written down my little notes, and I've made my dot points, and then I kind of can refer to them when I want to. But most of the time you can just talk, because I know what I want to talk about, and that's why it helps you present yourself. Again, the best thing you can do, apart from present yourself well, is know your stuff.
Great. So moving on just slightly from those kind of presentation side of things, maybe we might talk a little bit more about personal brand now. More so I wanted to touch on the fact that personal brand, especially in today's day and age with social media and cancel culture and all of those kind of things going on, it's really important, and it's the way that other people perceive you and the way that society reflects on your actions and achievements, I suppose. So I just wanted to ask how you would describe your personal brand.
Yeah, I had to think about this one, because it's not something that I would normally. It's not really a question that you'd ask yourself, which I guess is good that maybe organically I've cultivated this personal brand. Like, I haven't had to think about, and I haven't designed something to act this way. I just kind of have acted in line with my values and what I achieve and what I've wanted to achieve. And that's kind of, when I sat about and thought about it today, I thought, I guess that would be my personal brand. But first and foremost, I consider myself a proud Aboriginal man. That's, as I said, the first thing I consider, the first thing I want people to know about me, I guess. The thing I put out there the most, and what I value the most, is my identity as who I am. The second thing, I guess, workspace, is that I want my brand to be that I'm a competent and good sports broadcaster that enhances the coverage of any sport that I'm on. That I can bring something to it that I, as I said, I've worked and researched and done well enough that I can project something and give information to people that they may not know, and that enhances their experience of that sporting event that they're watching. And I guess the last part of it is that I believe I can, as well, I try and brand those two things together, or marry them up a little bit. That I'm a proud Indigenous man, and that I'm a good sports broadcaster, and I have this great platform, and I try and mesh them in together to try and create a little bit of change, or change a conversation, or make people more aware of some of the things that are prominent in Indigenous society through sport and through the media. I try and marry all those things up, because I've watched, if you talk about, as I said, the people that have used sport as such a powerful vehicle for change throughout history. You look at people like Muhammad Ali, Colin Kaepernick, people back here in Australia like Adam Goodes, Latrell Mitchell. Sport is such a powerful medium, and it has its negatives. It has the bad headlines, the negative headlines, but then it also has all the positive stuff that these athletes do, and the change that they can make, and the stories they represent, the communities they represent. Because a lot of them, as I said, come from disadvantaged backgrounds. They come from places that, they wouldn't have got these opportunities if they weren't good sportsmen. And for every great athlete, there's 50 cousins, uncles, brothers, sisters that maybe haven't got to break out of a cycle because they weren't born with that athletic ability. So I think it's important to shed the light on those people and their stories, their backgrounds, because people want to listen to them. People that, might not have many Aboriginal friends. I live here on the northern beaches of Sydney, and there's not as many Indigenous people here as there are in Moree, where I'm from. So a lot of people here might not know why, what happened in the frontier wars here in Australia and what was done to Indigenous people in certain places when colonisation happened. They might not know why Invasion Day is a thing. They might not know the statistics around Indigenous suicide rates, mortality rates of children, and women giving birth, all these things. But if they respect a footballer or they respect a player and they see that he's Indigenous, and then suddenly they're more likely to listen to what this person has to say, and then they might become more aware of the issues. So, and I always thought that part of my brand was to try and share that, to try and use that platform and use those sportsmen who, sometimes might not be the best at getting their point across, or, they don't have the avenue. And that's why we started this podcast. I do that, as I said, the Refuse to Lose podcast, and a lot of the stories we do for News Corp or Indigenous round leading up into the NRL, they're all heavily based on more social issues now than football, and what these guys see in their communities and what they want changed, and that helps people listen to them. So I think there's a long way of saying, my personal brand is kind of, I think, a sports reporter and commentator, but also someone who uses that platform to try and make a difference in the community that I come from and the broader, I guess, Australian community as well.
Yeah, and I suppose you'd say that organically connects with your deeper roots and what you're personally interested in, as you've sort of touched on, that helps build your personal brand as a whole, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're going to talk about that in personal brand and why it's important. And I think for me, like in my job, being a journalist, being a reporter, like there can be such negative connotations about being a reporter, right? There's a lot of journos out there. The media don't have the best rap. Certain journalists have certain reputations. Certain journalists deserve their reputations of what they do. And so you find that you have a lot of sportsmen and a lot of people in my industry that are mistrusting of journalists and reporters, which I can understand in a lot of ways. So I think the personal brand that I've tried to build, and why a personal brand is so important, and as I said, I've tried to do this organically as opposed to thinking about it, but I try and separate myself as someone that's more focused on the positives, as I said, trying to make a difference, trying to use the power and the influence I have for good, as opposed to selling a story, a short-term story. I've had multiple opportunities in my life where I knew something out of trust or a relationship that I had with someone or a mate, and I knew a story that could easily have got me ahead in my career. But I chose not to publish it or go with it because, first of all, it didn't really align with my values, that that's not what I want to do. I don't want to sell someone and ruin someone's life for something that is not, I think, really relevant and something that's just going to get me ahead. I would prefer to take the long approach and show someone that I'm not here just to sell you out or sell your story. I understand that people make mistakes, and I think I would rather have a long-term relationship with you and have you as a trusted person that I can call upon in the future and say, hey, look, I'm trying to organize this story. I think it would be good because of this. Can you help me out? The amount of times that has worked more in my favor by the personal brand that I've created as someone that is not, as just trying to sell the headline, but more trying to get the more in-depth answer, the more in-depth story behind someone's life. Well, as I said, I grew up with a lot of guys that went on to play professional football and stuff, and guys that had tough upbringings. And it used to frustrate me when I'd see in the media them being painted like, you know, they got a bit drunk at a party and then someone photographed them drunk somewhere. I was like, yeah, but you don't really understand the life this person's had. Like, I know for a fact that this mate has, you know, been abused as a child. He didn't have a family growing up. He's had a lot of difficulty, and he gets drunk at a party. That's barely an issue. I would rather tell his real story so people can empathize with it and have better understanding. So I think that's why creating a personal brand is, you know, it's all about being authentic. Like, I haven't thought of it as creating a personal brand, but I guess that's the thing I want to project to the people in my field of work, is that this is what I am, this is what I want to do. You know, and that way people know who you are. They can trust you with things. Clubs can trust you with things. The clubs are obviously very skeptical of media as well. Players can trust you with things, and that leads to more opportunity, I found, than the one short burn or the one little thing that might get you further ahead. So that's what I think is important.
Definitely. I think it's really important, and the way that you've built your personal brand, particularly around your values and your volunteer work, is really, really impressive to a lot of us, I think. I also think Nikia might have some questions, or Cara might have some questions from the audience for us at this point. So while we just get ready to receive some of those questions, there she is.
Yeah, cool. Thank you so much, Jake, for providing so many invaluable insights into how we can all present ourselves and ideas. Our interns are approaching their end of internship presentations over the next few weeks. So this workshop really couldn't have come at a better time. So thank you. There's a few questions coming through on the chat. So let's try to squeeze a few in before we end at 2 p.m. I might go with Irene's question first, which is, who was your biggest professional mentor when you were going through your cadetship, and what did you learn from them?
I've had a lot of great people that have mentored me over my life. I would have to say someone like probably Yvonne Sampson, who's a presenter at Fox Sports as well, and I've known for a long time. Kind of met when I was originally starting out. She's probably the best sports host in Australia. She's so smooth. She's so efficient in what she does, and she's just really taken the time to, number one, sit down with me and talk me through what she does, and teach me all the little tricks that she uses. And she's one of those people that, you know, it filled me with so much confidence for her to say, look, yeah, I hate doing this. I've, you know, like, it creates the same anxiety into me that it does in you. Like, for me, sitting there going, oh, you know, this is someone who does this for a living, is so good, and they must feel the same. Like, it shows that she showed me that you can succeed and be good at it despite feeling nervous. You can work through that. You can become better and better and get to her level. So I think someone like Yvonne, who's, you know, the face of the rugby league on Fox Sports and stuff, she's been a big mentor to me, and was a big mentor in me coming to Fox Sports as well. And I think she was even the one that kind of suggested for me to come over and push for me and with the bosses and stuff. So yeah, I think Bonnie Sampson's been a great, and she was the one who showed me the hard work. You know, she'd look at her notebooks, and there's just hundreds and hundreds of pages of things she's written down while she's on air, while she's scribbling ideas, while she's writing little things in her book, and just like never stops kind of just ticking her mind over and talking. And that, I think that's the key to being a good host.
Yeah, spot on. She sounds like a really amazing mentor. We also have another great question from Caitlin, and she's asking, whilst constantly being in the public eye, are there any things that helped you deal with pressure?
It's difficult a little bit. Like, as I said, a lot of the things I touched on today is that just kind of knowing your stuff. If you know your stuff, you know, at least there's pressure, but people will see that you know your stuff, you know, and they can forgive a mistake or a little stuff up or a blemish if that over the course of time that they see you, they realize that you put in effort and you know your things. And I think that takes away a little bit of the pressure if you know what's in the back of your mind and you have something to fall back on, that eases pressure on you, definitely. But then I think, it's a hard one. I don't know what I've really done to ease pressure, because I always feel it. But as I said, some of those things, just do your best, have your notes down, be well prepared, just talk, have your little pen in your hand, little things like that. Know that it's not the end of the world if it disappears. If it's not the best, it's done. People forget about it almost instantly. And it's on Mars now. I think that's the best way. That's the best little saying that I always remind myself. If you're not totally happy with something, there'll be 1,000 more opportunities to correct it.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. I think we'll all be using that saying in our professional careers a few times along the way. We have another really great question from Matthew, and he's asking, do you struggle with imposter syndrome? And if so, how do you overcome that?
Imposter syndrome. I guess sometimes you think, am I good enough to be here? Definitely. I'm very lucky. Like in my job, there's not many people like me in terms of someone that hasn't played the sport professionally, to be a male, to be kind of invited into football games, to kind of inject information. Like there's two commentators on a game, and then there's a sideline reporter, that's me. Like there's three people given the privilege to kind of add to this sport, and I'm one of them. And I think to myself, I'm very lucky to be where I am. And you probably question, like, why do I get to be so lucky? Why do I deserve to be there? Am I good enough to be there? And you make that little mistake, or someone points out one little thing on social media and goes, oh yeah, you stuff that up. Or, there's always been countless examples of me like not doing the best job, and you feel on yourself. But you have to I take confidence in the fact that, as I said, it's never as bad in your head it's never as bad in person that it is in your head. And people wouldn't put you there if they didn't think you were good enough. Like people think if someone's giving you the confidence to be there, and someone's giving you that right to be there, then you're good enough to be there. And the way you prove that is just by working harder than I try to go to games and think to myself, I couldn't possibly do any more preparation for that game. Like, I'll spend hours and hours and hours just typing notes about a game and players and stuff I know I'll probably never use. But if you go there knowing your stuff and it doesn't pan out exactly where you plan, or just stuffed up a little bit, and you think, am I good enough? You think, well, I couldn't have done any better. That's what I kind of, if you go there knowing that you couldn't have done any better in that moment, then what else can you do, really?
Yeah, cool. And I think we have time for just one more question. And this question is from Tanisha, and she's asking, what's a piece of information or feedback that you have taken throughout your whole career?
Throughout my whole career. That's a good one. That is a good one. It'd be, I think someone said to me early on that the person with the microphone has all the power. And I think that's really stuck with me, that you don't have to, you're in control. You're in control. So you know what you're going to do. You know where you're going to go. You know what you've got to say. Don't feel rushed. Don't feel, if you're speaking, people are listening to you. Don't feel like you need to get off or change or do anything because of what's being perceived outside of you. Just know what you've got to do and get it done. You have the power to kind of have that control. And the other one, I think, is, I've said it a fair few times, but I think no, actually, it's just someone told me once that you got to follow your passion, and then it's the old saying, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And I think if I've always followed a career path that I knew I loved. And that's why it makes doing the hard work easy. It makes hours and weekends spent doing a job, and everyone says to me, why do you do it? Why do you do that? Why do you, like, when everyone's out partying, you're in bed at, 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. It's because I love my job, and now I get to, go to sporting games for a living and have time off over summer because there's no footy on. And, it's, the harder you work for something that you're passionate about, I think it'll pan out.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. A lot of wisdom there. So thanks so much for sharing and answering all those questions. I'm just going to hand over now to one of my really wonderful students, Nakaya, to say a few words on behalf of the audience.
Thanks, Cara. Jake and Chelsea, I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge with us. Jake, I really liked at the beginning, the important through line of everything you were saying was maintaining that professionalism and kind of gaining advice from people that you're working with through your career. So thank you both so much. And I think that concludes everything for today. So we'll see everybody at 3 o'clock for Denise Bowden. Thanks.
Hello and welcome to session number 2 of day 2 of this year's LDI. My name is Will Sullivan and I'm a CareerTrackers advisor down here in Narm, and I'll be hosting today's session. I'm very lucky to have been in this role for a little while now, working with some amazing students, predominantly across Victoria, Tasmania, and a couple up in the Northern Territory. I do want to give a quick shout out to our Victorian students who have been so incredibly determined and resilient these past few years. We see you, we hear you, and we are in absolute awe of what you continue to achieve. I'd like to formally begin today by acknowledging that I'm hosting this session from the lands of the Wurundjeri people. I've grown up here on Wurundjeri country, but if you drive just down the road, you'd be on Bunurong country, where so many of Victorian students live, work, and study. So today, I want to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging of the Wurundjeri and the Bunurong people. I acknowledge and respect the continuing culture and the incredible contribution the Wurundjeri and the Bunurong people make to the life of this city and this region. I also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country throughout all the various lands you all dial in from today, and recognise the continuing connection to land, waters, and community. I also pay my respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here this afternoon. Now, yesterday you were introduced to the Ignite Event Launcher app. So to get involved in today's session, please make sure you download the app from the App Store and enter the code CT2022. It's a lot of twos. Inside the app is all the key details and the schedules. You'll also be able to jump in there and ask questions to our extraordinary guest speaker we have this afternoon. To do that, click on the interactive session button and head to the questions section. I have the great pleasure now of introducing today's guest speaker. Denise Bowden is a born and bred Northern Territory Indigenous woman. She's been the CEO of the Yothu Yindi Foundation and the director of the Garma Festival since 2010, during which time Garma has grown to become a major fixture of the Australian event calendar, attracting a who's who of leaders from the corporate, political, academic and philanthropic worlds. With Garma on hold the past 2 years, Denise has been busy transforming the Yothu Yindi Foundation's vision for a regional education hub in northeast Arnhem Land, from a dream into a reality. She was recently appointed to the Commonwealth Government's Senior Advisory Group, Parks Australia, and as a director of the board of Studio Schools Australia. Denise has been an outspoken advocate for the bush, providing advice on the state of the GST carve-up and the Northern Territory on behalf of Indigenous communities. We are so incredibly lucky to be joined by Denise here today. So without further ado, welcome Denise.
Thank you, Will. Lovely introduction. Appreciate that. I've prepared a speech for today, so I'm very much going to read from it, and hopefully you'll find this interesting today. We've got a lot going on, so I'm really privileged also to be able to share this with you today. So I'd like to thank everyone online here today. I believe there's quite a few from across the nation. My thanks to CareerTrackers for inviting me to present before this Leadership Development Institute conference. This session is titled Agents of Change, the Case for Policy Reform in Indigenous Affairs. And I want to start with a quote that has heavily influenced my life, and it was from the mouth of my mother, May Govern, that she gently advised me, control your life, don't allow your life to control you. And these words were the single most important piece of advice that she could have offered me as a child. It triggered my thinking from an early age about how easy it is to fall weightlessly into life's ebbs and flows. And for such a short statement, its meaning had a profound impact on my younger self, my direction in life, and the way in which I practice my own lifestyle still to this very day. I hope that by sharing with you some of my journey, it may put you in good stead to navigate your own careers and assist you in making healthy future decisions. My husband of 27 years would likely agree with this statement, but I am somewhat of a complex woman who just so happens to be of Indigenous descent. In this world, where we now all too often begin our sentence justifying a healthy pride in our heritage, for my part, Indigeneity does not define me, nor does my gender. But through the work that I do, you'll see that I am more than comfortable in my own skin without leaning too heavily on any one of my defining traits. I am my own individual. I apply a very serious disposition to life, and I am a naturally inquisitive person, and one that is loyal and ever ready to contribute to a better society. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Denise Bowden. My roots stretch across to the Croydon Shire in Queensland through my family, the Tagalugga traditional owners. My grandparents are Jack and Gertie Douglas. My mother, as I make many references to throughout my speech today, is May Govern, otherwise known to most as Nana May. My father is a non-Indigenous man with a Scottish background, just to draw in a cocktail of global richness in my genes. Yet I was born on Jarman country in Katherine, Northern Territory, 3 hours south of Darwin. I'm also blessed to have family connections right across the Northern Territory, more intensely associated through my work in northeast Arnhem Land. The Gunnumbaa and Yunupinguls are my family, so I have yet another layer of complexity and responsibility through my Yolngu family. There, my mother refers to me as Gunguru, an affectionate reference to the local native fruit found underground, the yam, which is a reliable staple in the diet of all Yolngu people. My name is referenced by the qualities of my personality, and therefore my strengths are reliability, a continued and constant presence, nurturing, steady, and connected by the Arnhem Land soil. Therefore, my roots, my colour, my make is a Tagalugga, Scottish, Jawan, Yolngu Australian background. But that aside, I am also daughter to May and Barry, a wife to Sean, a proud mother to Connor, a career tracker himself, of whom I'm very proud of and happens to be here with us online today. Hi, Connor. I'm also mother to his older brother, Michael Bowden. I'm the younger sister to Jeannie and Cheryl, and auntie to Matthew, Keith, Zach, and Talia. My cousins, Trafina and Carmen, on my mother's side are also too close by. So my family are widespread across Queensland, but mostly the top end of the Northern Territory. That is, as leaders in your own right, you too will have been influenced by many special people in your lives, hopefully more positively than not. But you've more than likely taken your cue by society and its messaging when you entered this world. When I was born, for example, in the 1970s in outback bush Australia, living conditions on a private pastoral cattle station with my parents and two sisters was hard work, and therefore these were challenging times. In some respects, laying the Northern Territory's foundation was taking place at that time, and these are physically different days of toil. Fortunately, though, the housing conditions found on a pastoral station out bush were far better conditioned than most communities, and thus more than adequate for our small family. But we had no mod cons, such as mobile phones. We had no digital media. And by the age of 10, we'd often have learnt to drive a four-wheel drive car solo, boosted atop a bucket so we could see over the steering wheel unlicensed. And it was commonplace to drive on unsealed roads. The two-way radio was the closest thing to real-time news, and we led a simple life, reading Archie Andrews and Foot Flat comics. We played endless games of cards for entertainment. We swam in flood-ravaged rivers and survived. The freshwater crocodiles were our friends, and our typical weekend often meant our parents would inflate a massive tractor tube, drive as many kids that'd fit on it upstream in the Catherine River, and we'd be left to our own devices floating downstream until we literally sailed back home and through the front door, which would take the better part of a day. And through it all, we were happy enough and we survived because we had very little choice. Otherwise, literally, we were thrown in the deep end. The television was black and white, and the ABC was broadcasting the Goodies, Countdown, and Lassie the dog ended in 1974. And I have a favourite memory of turning up the radio volume to Helen Reddy's belting out, "I am woman, hear me roar," but I never really could grasp the extent to why she had to make such a statement. The Northern Territory at that time was still trying to figure out a place for Indigenous people in society. In 1966, Vincent Lingiari led his people on a strike for better work and pay conditions, famously known as the Wave Hill Walk-Off. In 1972, when I was born, and most of you would be familiar with it, there exists that grand photo of Prime Minister Gough Whitlam pouring earth back into the hands of Lingiari as a symbolic gesture for when his land was returned to him some 6 years later. In 1963, the modern land rights movement began in opposition to mining with the case Millipum v Nabalco, where the Yolngu people of northeast Arnhem Land protested their removal from land on which their families had lived and hunted and maintained connections to sites of significance for thousands of years. And again in 1971, they took the fight up to authorities, challenging recognition in a desperate attempt to explain the complexity of the Yolngu system of law to govern land. Here, the Yirrkala Bark Petition was created in both Yolngu Matha and English language, quite a unique and confronting milestone in Australia's history and a real indication of Yolngu people's determination to retain their culture during difficult times. And sometimes, something of which I've always sort of appreciated in its difficulties, and I really take my hat off to those people that did that significant legwork for us all. Interestingly, though, that very case ended with the court rejecting the claim because Yolngu people's relationship to the land did not fit the European concept of property. And at this point, I ask you please to park that thought in the back of your mind, mull it over a little, ponder on it, as the concept of a Western culture rejecting a different one is something that returns to me again and again in my career, and I suspect that you too will encounter this throughout your own life's career and journey. I've experienced a government system across the board, whether at a federal, state or local level, which tries to place square pegs into round holes and continues to try to make a perfect connection point again and again and again and again, and often fails. And it's never been more evident to me than it is now through the Yothu Yindi Foundation's work that we currently undertake today. Without a doubt, policy development is hard work, even prior to COVID. However, I am privileged to have witnessed change in my life for the better. There's a lot more to do, by the way, but I feel we've played a very big part in pushing reform along with governments of all political persuasions over the last 11 years that I've been at the Yothu Yindi Foundation. Let me come back to that later, though. In 1973, my mother's career took off and she became the Aboriginal Liaison Officer for the Department of the Chief Minister in Katherine, a town 3 hours south of Darwin. She was involved in many areas of Aboriginal affairs at a territory and national level where she had to be across a time of significant legislative change, dealing with welfare challenges, attending native title land claim hearings and other complex tasks. And she was appointed as a member of the inaugural Northern Territory Women's Advisory Council in 1984. And by 1991, her career was well and truly cemented, keeping her busy and travelling regularly in line with her duties. She was highly respected for her work and her reputation preceded her. And as a result of her hard work, she was elected as the first Aboriginal alderman to the Katherine Town Council in the 80s. In 1993, May won the Telstra Business Women of the Year award for the Northern Territory. And for a woman who was wrapped up in really shiny black skin in the 70s, well, I can only imagine a portion of what she was having to manage and wading through at that time. My mother's work ethic, if you hadn't have guessed already, really impressed me, really ingrained in me a sense of the legacy that she'd created. And I saw her confidence grow from the pride in which she took from creating her own identity and holding her own confidently in her own space. She led by example so impressively that I could see myself continuing to carry on the work that she had forged on her own pathway. In 1976, the Aboriginal Land Rights Act was legislated and the Commonwealth Racial Discrimination Act was passed. Also significantly, in 1982, the Mabo case had finally and formally challenged the legal system, overturning the concept of terra nullius. So in my lifetime, I have watched and been personally impacted by families, close friends, colleagues, and loved ones as they fought for their rights. They hadn't necessarily chosen the fight. Oftentimes it was in reaction to forced policy, and they had no choice but to react to survive. And that sometimes created people who were angered or frustrated due to being impacted by government policy that didn't always seem fair, or was in response to policy that was applied at a higher level that looked, in all practical terms, very different from what was actually happening on the ground in the trenches. I observed, sat back, pondered in my younger lifetime, influenced by the details associated with matters such as the Royal Commission into Deaths in Custody. My sister, Connor's auntie, has been an active and influential member of the reconciliation process, forging better relationships between Black and white Australians. She's also reminded our family that respect for another human should never be forgotten. I've made close friendships with members of the stolen generation and watched their struggles, sometimes themselves lost due to heartbreaking colonial influence. I've cried when the apology to the stolen generation was made in 1997, and I wondered why such evil existed when the Prime Minister was advised henny penny the sky was falling, and his apology, therefore, would be the ruin of Australia. Yet here we are, still today. I've seen that come and pass us by, realising the drama was uncalled for in its attempt to throw us off the bigger important picture. I've seen the establishment in 1990 of the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Commission, otherwise known as ATSIC. I've understood its strengths and I've understood its weaknesses when it was abolished at the mere stroke of a pen. Poof, and it was gone. In the absence of any red tape restrictions or any legislative change. I see myself, therefore, as a product of the times, my era from the 1970s. I've known how hard it has been for Aboriginal people to fight their cause, fight for their children, fight for a better life for their family, refuse to remain a minority in a government system that has no place for Indigenous language, for Indigenous law, for Indigenous clans, and our complex family structures. I know well the spiritual association to land and to law that is practiced by our Indigenous community, and to be born into it is an entirely different thing to view merely from afar. I have always wanted to leave in my trailer a more peaceful and calm life for my own children. I didn't want them to deal with the racism that my elders experienced throughout life. I wanted my kids to have the ability to choose and rightfully earn a decent position in life, purely out of respect for those who worked so hard before our generation's time, people like May Govan. So our family motto has been to grasp your life and make it what you want it to be. If you want to be treated a minority, then so be it. That's fine if that is the choice that you have chosen to make. But don't fall into the trap of life dictating to you. There is another term you may have come across previously, one I also apply to my work. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. And I think those words tell 1,000 stories. But if you want to influence, if you want to be a part of creating further change, pave your own way forward. Do not sit back and wait for someone to tap you on the shoulder and give you the permission to be a leader in yourself. You simply must seize the opportunity and chase the dream that you have. So my personal advice to you is that you must have a reason to get out of bed every day, something that is a driving force that leaves behind your positive footprint. And so this brings me to the functions of my professional responsibility as the CEO of the Yothu Yindi Foundation and the director of the annual Garma Festival. And with it, I believe we have a PowerPoint presentation ready to go. Thank you. Thank you. First, to help you understand the remote nature of where I work, I need to set the scene for you. Nhulunbuy, as you'll see on the map, is the 6th largest population centre in the Northern Territory. It has been a mining township, primarily bauxite and alumina, since the 1960s. Rio Tinto ceased mining in 2014, and their current exit strategy has meant the refinery has been curtailed, creating a drop to population of 1,500 people. Really significant for a small town. Either they were redeployed or made redundant. And as this dust has settled, life amongst the midst to emerge are the traditional owners of northeast Arnhem Land. These are the Yolngu people, who are recognised as the lawful owners under the Aboriginal Land Rights Act 1976. Permits are required to enter into Aboriginal owned land. Yolngu communities are dry, meaning no alcohol can be consumed in regional parts, and permits must give you permission to purchase grog. The town is referred to as Gove or Nhulunbuy, depending on who you ask. Typically, your average local requires a reliable four-wheel drive vehicle to cope with the torrential monsoon wet season. Also, a good understanding of driving unsealed roads, and one generally has a reason for travelling to such a remote location, usually associated with work or family. If you're planning to drive Darwin to Gove, you have the option of driving the 12 hours to northeast Arnhem Land, or catch a flight departing Darwin that will take you just over an hour. Off season, a flight will set you back $400. Peak season, that price will double one way, meaning a $1,600 round trip if you're not organised. There is one Woolworths, one public pool to escape the 40-degree heat, one BP fuel stop, a beach called Little Bondi, and here you'll find the typical needs required of a mining township that has extracted billions of dollars worth of minerals from that land. It is a picturesque part of the land. The fishing stock is plentiful, and the Yolngu people still rely on a traditional seafood diet, which ordinarily they'll still spear. So introducing the Yothu Yindi Foundation, we're a small non-government organisation based in Darwin and Nhulunbuy. And the vision of the Yothu Yindi Foundation is for Yolngu people and other Indigenous Australians to have the same level of wellbeing and life opportunities and choices as non-Indigenous Australians. Yolngu Mata is the first spoken language in northeast Arnhem Land, English the second. So the communication barrier alone is something we manage in the first instance always. The Yothu Yindi Foundation was established in 1990 by Yolngu community leaders and persons of authority from 5 clan groups of that region, the Gumach, Ridajingal, Japul, Gulpul and Wangari clans, to nurture and present traditional cultural practices, share knowledge and culture, and create economic opportunities for Yolngu and other Indigenous Australians. We do all of those undertakings through our advocacy, education and annual Garma Festival work, all under direction of a Yolngu cultural authority referred to as the Yothu Yindi Dilak Council. Just quickly, pressing on our advocacy work, YYF has for many years now provided advice that helps people understand the challenges of traditional Indigenous people living very remotely. So I have provided CareerTrackers with some links should you be interested in our Indigenous advancement strategy and or our submission to the Productivity Commission regarding horizontal fiscal equalisation, which is, my apologies, very bureaucratic speak. So in plain English, this has meant, for example, exposing the unfair nature of government spending when it comes to addressing the extremities of Indigenous and remote disadvantage. So compare, for example, the way the government treats someone living in a very remote community, let's say Galawinku, with inadequate housing, no running water, shoddy electricity, and 6 children with limited job potential, where English is the second language, against, say, an Indigenous person who lives in central CBD, in Parramatta, Parramatta, educated with a job and public transport and a supermarket close by. Our work has successfully highlighted many inadequacies and inconsistencies, such as how statistics are collected, how they're analysed, how they're applied, how they're measured for both those scenarios on an equal footing when clearly the disparity is not acknowledged by the Treasury formula. When clearly that is the case, particularly when, for example, the cost of living at each destination is diabolically different. We've been very outspoken when we see governments from all sides of the political spectrum that might be reluctant to cooperate when in positions of power, especially in reality when those positions of power are based upon an election cycle ever changing and politicians for whom being returned to an electorate seat is their number one focus. This advocacy work is very interesting. It is important substance to understand, and it's a very difficult story to clearly articulate to you how these complex systems work. Because guess what? As a taxpayer, you too are working inside this system right now, and you really should find or research this information, be aware of its existence in your own work and how it relates to you in your own backyard. Understand it, and you'll know upon which boundaries you are able to operate and the ones in which you can't, and then weigh up yourself whether that's okay. YYF's advocacy work is important, but what is equally, if not more important, is our flagship event called the Garma Festival, held out in northeast Arnhem Land. And you can see from the slideshow how eclectic my world is. I get to rub shoulders with these amazing people, and I know them all personally, and I feel rather blessed by the work that I do. Garma is held on a culturally significant ceremonial ground 40 kilometres outside the township of Gove. And what started as a small gathering that was little more than a backyard barbecue and pre-pandemic in its heyday grew into an event of major national, cultural and political significance. 2,650 guests from all around Australia and the world would join the annual Mecca to Arnhem Land. The dates for the Garma Festival this year are 29th of July to August. And if you have any questions on Garma, please send them through to me. Maybe not straight away. It's a big festival, obviously, probably too much to get through today, but I'm more than happy to respond accordingly. But just to be mindful of the fact that there's traditional song and music and dance with 70,000 years worth of rich and unique material out our way, which should be completely preserved, and we should be completely proud of it too. Also at the Garma Festival, we have the Youth Forum, so it's approximately about 80 children that come from across the North Australia. Some schools might be Melbourne Grammar, some might be Scotch College, some might come from the Pilbara way out, very remote areas, and we put them together with kids in the homelands and outstations from northeast Arnhem Land. Some central desert schools come up, and it's pretty much worlds colliding there. So those kids get to have that ongoing communication, and we're very lucky to have made those introductions. They work, and I feel they work because it's a grassroots program. The key forum, you would have seen slideshows, lots of heavyweights in there jostling for prime billing and having their name up in lights. Getting the schedule together can be obviously a bit of a nightmare, as you can imagine, fitting in all those strong personalities, and oftentimes going bush is sometimes a shock for politicians and corporates as they're not used to living outside of their comfort zones. Garma, though, still is a grassroots festival for the locals. It's a meeting point for the clans and families of the region, and the program is packed with local talent, whether it's musicians and bands who play each night at the concert, or the artists whose work is on display in the outdoor gallery, or the skilled artisans and community leaders who run the craft and cultural workshops. For all the fanfare about politicians and corporate heavyweights, at its heart, Garma remains a festival put on by the local community for the enjoyment of the local community by a Yolngu board of directors, and myself as a director of the festival with a team, a seasonal team. So each year, the words life-altering are consistently returned to our team to describe a person's Garma journey. Roller coaster ride is another, and we're very mindful of ensuring our guests are in a good frame of mind when they leave our region for their home bases. We utilise our influence through the festival to drive policy change, such as the advocacy work that I've mentioned previously. But this platform is our own. It's of our own creation. It's independent. It's not a government directive. So you'll find it remains true to the local community and their voice. So you may be asking yourself, how do we do that? I'll speak first about the education work, as it is a game changer in terms of community and family aspirations for our children. Since the Garma Festival was cancelled due to COVID, we have transitioned what usually is a 12-month preparation annually to delivering our other two major projects. The first is the Empowered Communities Yothu Yindi Dilak Council, which is the preferred governance model from Northeast Arnhem Land, very much a Yolngu clan-based grassroots senior leadership structure that works with governments, either Commonwealth, state and local, on regional priorities. It is a self-generated cultural authority that is working with government on long-term vision from a clan perspective. The theory is that family that have been living on country know it well, and they might know a thing or two about the land and its needs. And they will always remain anchored to their territory through their clan. And how it is serviced requires a collaborative approach between Yolngu and government service providers. It favours the pooling of funds for regional priority, and it demands accountability for all collaborative partners when time to time there are congestion points or matters of indifference. The Northern Territory's juvenile detention system, for example, is incarcerating 100% Indigenous youth right now, today. The importance of a Council of Elders is an imperative group that government should interact with on various matters of the court system, bush courts, culturally appropriate advice and family involvement. Again, this is not an easy conversation to have and requires a diplomatic touch. And the language translation is very important from Yolngu Mata to English. The Dilak have their own priorities, and their job this year will fold itself into the regional Voice to Parliament work, which was co-designed last year. The second major project of Yothu Yindi Foundation creates a major change to education delivery in Northeast Arnhem Land. Both of these undertakings are significant, and both are game changers that require an understanding of the community of Northeast Arnhem Land. And a simple example of a simple complexity of our region, you try pronouncing Japati Munungarich and Jakapura Munyurinyan, getting those names right and the spelling right, and tell me whether they're male or female from afar. It's incredibly difficult. So it isn't easy, let alone understanding the family and kinship structures from this region or the remote challenges, distances and supply chains. The first year I recall understanding the tidal shifts and crocodile-infested rivers and nailing some intel on the best fishing places, even understanding the grading of cyclone warnings. And after a while, the challenges associated with ill health, such as rheumatic heart disease, Mercado-Joseph disease, limited tide and insufficient housing, whereby we become simply immune to such impoverished conditions. And it all becomes second nature at the end of the day, which is why our Yolngu Board of Directors is so fundamental to keeping our work grounded with family at our core. And so the Yothu Yindi Foundation have a all Yolngu Board of Directors. Galarrwa Yunupingu is our chairman. And obviously his leadership on a national scale has been long-standing, and therefore his ability to guide and direct those is super important to us. So a lot of those Yolngu people on our board get to contribute to the makeup of all of our programs, and they have the ultimate endorsement over it all. Government often find that very difficult, that independent and self-empowering model, but this is absolutely required, and without that advice I think there's something really missing. Getting backpacks and schools ready, hiring musical performers from across Australia and internationally. I get to meet some amazing people who might give keynote speeches. I get to also be on country and learn a lot of cultural workshops, such as basket weaving and how you get those stunning colours through those pandanus. Australia's Prime Minister, Mr. William McMahon, travelled to Northeast Arnhem Land to the site that we hold the Garma Festival, and there he opened what was called the Dupama School. And 1972 to 1979, Dupama School was opened, and operated. And the Northern Territory government decided that it was too expensive. There was failing infrastructure. It was incredibly difficult to maintain given the remote nature of where it was based. So without notice, almost the day before, people were advised that school would not be opening the next day and kids were sent home. So the Yothu Yindi Foundation realised that we saw leaders in our region, and these were the leaders from the Dupama College of 1979. And from there on, there was a gap of leaders, and it's because the numeracy and literacy skills were no longer, you couldn't see it. And the public school system didn't have the same merit that the old Dupama College did. So bringing it back into the present time, being 2022, and the work that we've done while Gama has had a breather while COVID takes centre stage, we have now created an independent education model which retains the important pieces of numeracy and literacy, but it upends the formula and turns it inside out and upside down. And to its core, Yolngu culture and language are held on a pedestal. In the community of Gunyangara, culture and language are held on a pedestal, and kinship, law and songlines are an integral and fundamental part of a Yolngu children's education journey. To help you understand better the relationship that has been forged with our dear partners in Barker College, a co-ed Anglican private school based in Hornsby in North Shore, Sydney, I'd like now to share, please, the Dupama Barker footage.
Welcome to the township of Gunyangara, population 250. This is the home place of the Yolngu people of Northeast Arnhem Land, Northern Territory. Welcome.
Foundational learning for me is the major foundation itself. When I say foundation, we are looking at, for Yolngu, it is where we want to start. Dupama principal yang ada ko, dokter yang ada ko nanya ngunya, marangayro yutta deramu kami ya ngutan pit ayah punya pit ini yucor aja yang boleh ngutan itu, aja pelakan na. Ate pungro getton rambangi nga pagi kayo taro marma iruanganya.
Papa merengo mare merengo olena merengo koroto merero perka per markelele wala au pedi ora wallam numero markelele adel kan spend time with Yamar Kole.
Hello everyone, my name is Marina. I am the Barker Global Project Manager for East Arnhem. The importance of working in true partnership is something that Yolngu have always pioneered over many, many years. Through our relationships, which is at the core of the Yolngu culture, it also helps bring us forward into the future. I see the opportunity of true partnership between Barker and Yothu Yindi Foundation to establish this Dupama Barker Junior School K to Year 6 here in the Gunyangara community as a really positive step forward for all Yolngu people.
Hello everybody, my name is Elena Wangura and I am the Regional Coordinator for the Yothu Yindi Foundation based here in Nhulunbuy. And the uniqueness about this project is that it's Yolngu led and it's also Yolngu owned. And this is a vision that has been long-standing for Yolngu people here in this region. And it's really exciting for us to be able to see that vision come to reality. And, you know, that wouldn't have happened without the determination and the will of the Yolngu people and the community, and also without the help of our partners on this project.
Yolngu have wanted to have a school that they call their own, that they manage that they work with Balanda or whitefellas to ensure that the best of Yolngu learning and Western learning comes together.
Walami Mitaga in the language of the Darug people, where I am standing at Barker College to greet you, our good friends from the Yothu Yindi Foundation in northeast Arnhem Land on Yolngu country. One of the most exciting things that we're really looking forward to in the coming years is developing our partnership with the Yothu Yindi Foundation for the re-establishment of the Dupamar College. It is a huge honour for our school and we are so excited about what lies ahead in the formation, maybe even the reformation of a full new vision of empowered learning here in a country that so desperately needs peace through proper reconciliation. I'm so pleased that you've included Barker in this journey. Greetings from everybody in this community. I can't wait to actually be present with you personally to see Dupamar College started again.
The Yothu Yindi Foundation is incredibly excited with our partnership with Barker College. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Our vision collectively is to acknowledge, respect and incorporate Yolngu culture into the very essence of our education pathway moving forward. The community have been very outspoken about ensuring that Yolngu culture is acknowledged and respected and interweaved inside an education curriculum, and we're looking forward to the journey ahead. Prior to COVID, we were seeing a 37% school attendance rate, so not really impressive, I believe. Post-COVID, we're seeing or hearing of a 4% school attendance rates, and obviously that's not sustainable. Community of Northeast Arnhem Land have said, listen, let us have a go at creating an education pathway for our own children that is not built on deficit language, it's built on acknowledging and respecting the beauty of Yolngu culture and a native tongue that's uniquely Australian.
Yo namer bukmak ngaranya ko ingi ya koyola ka lea daling mir lea ol mamir ngara jambar puimo ka in 1973 ngarany markinan Dupamar kolit ngara ngoniling go ngoniling ngara ko bisin balang ngan ngoran in one of those classes walkan bicara dengan teacher mala Toniga school, a transition nongodoal into Nulunbo area school. But keeping in mind, only can always thinking about what you want to be. When you grow up, that was a clear picture. We had a vision where we were going, studying, migrate to the Yolngu matter room, English room, to cope with Wanga, Western world.
Hello, my name is Mirkiawe Kanambar Stubbs. I was a student going to the Dupamar boarding school back in the 70s. For a Yolngu child growing up in a Yolngu community, it was an amazing experience. Learning the Yolngu side of our environment and all those other things that a Yolngu child must learn before going to the Western side of education. Being at Dupamar was, I think, to me, was the most amazing place to learn this.
My name is Panbapu Ganambar, and I'm just going to talk about what my experience was at Kolkola. Dupamar. Me and my sister and my brothers grew up at Kolorunga. Our grandfather, Mungurawi Yunupingo, who is the landowner of Kolkola, decided to move to Kolkola. What he said was, now I will move to Kolkola and my granddaughters will go to the school here. So we all did. It gave me an insight about education, challenging myself towards better education. I was learning both ways, English, and it made me stronger too of who I was.
You can be doctors, lawyers, Peter and Turner, boilermakers, creating now things life so that it suits you, but as long as you remember your past, as long as you remember your identity.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So since that footage was produced in 2020, the Dupama Barker Junior School has now opened as a transition to Year 6 campus, and it is producing the next wave of leaders. And this has been a very interesting time for our team as we've learnt much in how transitioning away from a public school education system compares to how an independent private school is far more pliable, far more flexible in its approach, which shrugs off the bureaucratic red tape and empowers the community to set its own pace with family involvement. The Dupama Barker partnership is a fundamental part of the community's original vision. It is a very important piece of a bigger education picture for the Yothu Yindi Foundation's trajectory. This school, which is still only 10 months old, has been the first anchor point in what we refer to as an education pipeline. We have now extended our work more broadly with Studio Schools Australia, and together we are delighted to have entered another transitional stage, and it is the second phase of what we're creating with significant support of the Commonwealth Government. The Commonwealth have committed $75 million across 4 national sites, one of which is in northeast Arnhem Land, where the Dupama Barker Transitional Junior School will feed into a secondary Dupama Studio School Australia, where students will benefit from a full residential model of learning on country at the Garma Festival site. They will remain close to family and community and strengthen language and culture. And as Indigenous Social Justice Commissioner June Oscar reminded us not long ago, with boarding schools impacted by lockdown and travel restrictions in place, the need to provide high quality education and community is higher than ever before. The third stage of our education pipeline, exclusively an initiative of the Yothu Yindi Foundation and our Yolngu leadership, is the Garma Institute, a tertiary vocational education facility also based at Gulkula, in partnership with our long-term partners in the University of Melbourne. We are currently in the process of designing this learning institute that acknowledges our professors of cultural law, doctors of healing, historians of songlines, protectors of intellectual property, artisans of international significance, multilingualist diplomats that are more well globally travelled than most. In Arnhem Land, our community respects those cultural positions of responsibilities, and our lives operate around those important levers that we see as being the backbone of our community. These are both men and women that form the glue that binds the moral fibre of our community. It unifies our Yolngu clan structures, yet they carry no diplomas, they have no university qualifications, they are not recognised in Western society for the responsibilities that tie families to their land, that maintain the spiritual songlines that have for many thousands of years now been the creators of religious Indigenous stories that have linked the Macassans and Sulawesi of Indonesia, brave souls that have braved the trade winds and together created one of Australia's first Indigenous economies of scale. The Yothu Yindi Foundation considers our business matters to be of a vital nature to Australia's history, much as we see Indigenous affairs now being considered in a more measured and celebrated manner these days. But there is much more to do to improve life on the ground for other Australians, and that is the reason why you each here today are important to Australia's bright future. And as I conclude this speech, I'd like to leave with you a few further tips for consideration. These are drawn from my book, and I draw heavily on them again and again over the years, and these principles have allowed me to sleep soundly at night, comfortably. And I hope that they guide you throughout the 2022 year. There are 10 of them. Number 1, be measured in your approach. Number 2, always check yourself. One's self-reflection and self-awareness can help you as a person go a long way. Number 3, deliberately choose your contest. Never leave yourself open and box clever. 4, lie and it's going to come back to haunt you. Maybe not tomorrow, but it might in 10 years. Honesty is all round the best policy. Number 5, be influential no matter how old you are. To get someone over the line with your logic is an art form in itself. Number 6, don't go the easy path if you're going to undermine your principles or your brand. A shortcut quickly turns into a long shot. Follow your gut. You'll be able to live with your actions, and if you're wrong, you'll learn by your past mistakes. Number 8, be respectful in your dealings. You never know when your paths will cross again. Australia is a small island. 9, stay your course. Do not get blown off it, and if you do, review and get back to basics. And number 10, always remember your roots, for that is what has created you. And that, everybody, really does bring me to the end of my speech. So I'd like to thank you each for your time and attention. And I hope that I've given you some advice to take away from this session today. Thank you. And I believe there's some Q&As in place. Bill?
There is, Denise. You've absolutely lit up. I have no doubt there'll be so many people tuning in today that will take so much from that. I did really love listening to the tractor tube down the Catherine River. I had a big grin on my face listening about that. So I might just jump into the questions now. So in terms of, so the first question here is, thank you for sharing your personal story. It's very inspiring. So with your work involving the mob and community, how do you manage to separate your personal life from your work?
It's a very good question, and I actually don't. I don't. I feel it's, double boots in all the time. If this is the commitment that you make and the commitment that you make to your community. The Yolngu people have this amazing ability to draw you in as a family, and it's not only a very special thing to have happen to you, it means that you're forever connected to that family. So it's a very good question, and one I do hopelessly at.
And a very good answer as well, Denise. Thank you. So in terms of, you talked about bureaucrats a little bit there. So do you often feel you have to keep your personal feelings in check when dealing with bureaucrats?
Well, again, because I've got that very personal link to families, that's a very difficult, and I feel as if it's an important place to be, so that you can provide that information to a bureaucrat who oftentimes are based in Canberra making policy. So, you really do have to have that understanding of the ebb and flow of the region. And if you're going to be making policy about that's going to be applied on the ground out there, you damn well should know your background. So I do believe that has been a really big a part of the work that we have done previously. And once that might have been a very, very difficult and sensitive conversation to communicate to a bureaucrat. But as I mentioned before, things are getting a bit better now, and people can understand that no one size all fits approach. It just doesn't work like that. You have to really have a customized approach to making that change happen on the ground. Yeah.
And that's a great answer. And we've got a few questions coming through about policy. So CT interns and alumni have strong support from Corporate Australia. So what do you see as Corporate Australia's role in advancing Indigenous policy change?
I've found the way that our model has worked has really opened up to Corporate Australia, and we've helped Corporate Australia, I think, also come out of their comfort zone when the way that they that their model works might be at the boardroom level, or might be in a very different setting. So Corporate Australia have more and more come willingly to the Garma Festival, for example, where that conversation's very raw and it's very real, and you have real people talking about those situations on the ground. And oftentimes, people don't understand that to get to a certain particular place in Northeast Arnhem Land's often very difficult, and power cards, and there's how do you get a password when you've got no internet connectivity? Sometimes you don't have any power. Sometimes your fridge is off and you lose all your food. So bureaucrats do need to understand those things when they're making these policies, but so does Corporate Australia, because I feel previously Corporate Australia would just take advice from government. But again, that election cycle has a lot to play for some of the responses that you might often get. And everybody's getting better at it. I don't want this to be a negative thing. Government, take my hat off to government. They are trying. I do see them trying, and I do see Corporate Australia doing that. So how how can they do more of the same? I think you have to connect with local communities more, and that will do its own organic shift, I think.
Yeah.
Hope that answered the question.
No, it's a great answer. And we've got heaps of questions coming in about Garma. So in what ways can, students and interns support the Garma Festival? I noticed that there are volunteering options. Is that open to anyone? And just on top of that, is anyone able to attend Garma, or do you have to be invited?
Yeah, very good questions. We get about 80 volunteers every year. You go through a fairly rigorous filtering process. It's an application that should become available after we've publicly announced the festival dates, of which we won't probably do until around April, where we've got a horrific and alarming number of COVID cases out in northeast Arnhem Land that have reached regional remote communities now. So we're just holding our breath, understanding the severity of the impact of COVID on the ground and how the resources will manage that. We will wait probably until around April, May, so watch the Yothu Yindi Foundation website. And if you would like to become a volunteer, there's an application process there online. Anybody is able to attend the Garma Festival ordinarily, so it's not by invitation only. We find Corporate Australia, however, has provided considerable support where they will find some of their secondees, or they will ask some of their interns to attend the Garma Festival, and they get given a role to play at the festival, and that helps us out also. The Yothu Yindi Foundation has a number of enormous tasks to roll that event out. It's obviously in a bush location, so yeah, I hope to see some career tracker interns or volunteers at the Garma Festival. If you do go through the application process, please come up to me and say hello, and I'd love to meet you.
That sounds terrific. I think you might have a bit of traffic on the website, the Savo. Now, in terms of CT interns and alumni, what do you see as how can students get involved in policy, and how do you see that moving forward?
So look, the horizontal fiscal equalisation submission we did with the Productivity Commission, when we submitted it, we didn't realise how much support we'd get behind the scenes from Corporate Australia. It was a hard conversation to have because it was very critical. However, I don't see it being critical. I saw it as being a healthy debate about the whole situation, which is a debate that has to happen if you're ever going to get traction. I figure if there is any way, to support that policy debate, then, indicate that on your volunteering application, or if you have any chance to intern at the Yothu Yindi Foundation, that's an amazing way to have some insight into those policy discussions. We have had interns before, and they're sitting in the boardroom with us as we're having these conversations with bureaucrats. It's a all warts and all approach to those discussions, and not something that should be, I guess, hidden.
Yeah, terrific. And this is a bit of a question about you now, Denise. What keeps you motivated and inspired to keep doing the work that you're doing?
I feel as if, thanks for the question. I'm glad somebody's caring about my own personal self. But look, I really do. I find the work really interesting. I find that I'm motivated because I can see results. I see the outcomes, and I see change happening. And I don't get out of bed every day to do more of the same. I really, and our board are focused on outcomes and better improving services on the ground. And we see that with children, smiling more, have a better ear and oral health. We see that in small measures, and we don't always measure in the same way that government does. For example, if families are staying together more and more, and we're seeing them healthy in their relationships, I mean, that's a great telling point. We see young men who are at risk age, who are participating in our programs. They're being a part of those conversations while the cultural authority are organising, coordinating it all. So for me, it's really does boil down to family involvement. I also hope that, the work that I've done has been something that has continued on from my mother also. And Connor's online, and I hope that he continues this legacy too.
I can see him nodding and smiling down the bottom of the screen. I might just jump to one more question from Sabrina. So what advice do you give someone who wants to connect more to their culture? I'm really big for committing and connecting with your local community and understanding who's who in the zoo and how it all interacts, and who your backbone. Those reliable people are so important to the region, and enabling them to do their work is really important. So I think being on the ground is the most important thing that you can do to understand how you can strengthen community and those leaders around you. Yeah, terrific answer. And I might just now throw to someone you obviously know very well. So Connor's got a little thank you.
Sorry, Zoom rooms. Yeah, thank you, Mum, for sharing your story and opening up and sharing the advice that you've gathered over a long career and change making and stuff like that. Sharing stuff about Nana May, the advice that she's given you has come down in generations, and it's passed down to me and my brother, and hopefully some of the interns out there can really take in what she said and what she's taught us and take that into their own life, because she was such an impactful woman. Just on behalf of CareerTrackers, thank you very much, Mum. And yeah, we really appreciate you and all the work you're doing across Australia.